Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, where I was just looking at when our best bet was going to be for taking all of our components here over to Eve, and it looks like the answer is going to be somewhere around here. So that is interesting, to be sure. So that means that we have a lot of time to work on our inclinations. So let's go ahead and head back to the tracking station, and we're going to do exactly that. Now, last episode, we did discover that our antennas don't go through fairings, and that's good to know. We also discovered that we can't rebuild those fairings, at least as far as we know. So, we're going to have to do this the old-fashioned way. We're going to grab the module mining G here, and we should be pretty much right at the, I'm not sure if we'll be at the ascending or descending node, but we'll be pretty much right at one of those, and we can do this manually. We're a little bit past the descending node, it looks like, so we need to go to normal, and we'll physics warp as we turn over towards normal. Excellent. And let's just go ahead and burn this. This is not a super high thrust to weight engine, it would appear, but that's okay. 0.35, that's fine. So we're going to physics warp as we burn this, and that's down to 1 degree now. Half a degree. 3, 2, 1. Good enough. Okay, so there's our inclination change for this particular object. We are, of course, going to head back to the tracking station and get another one. We have several that are all on the way. So the next one that we're going to do is going to be the module deployable, and then we're going to need to do Charlie. We already did the fuel transit, and then we're going to need to do the Ascent module. So deployable, Charlie, Ascent. Sounds good. We're going to check to see if we have a connection here. It almost looked like we did for a moment there. No, we don't have a connection. That's fine. We're going to go ahead and flip around to the normal. We have 57 meters per second left in the first stage here. We're going to need to make sure that we have Eve set as our target. And we're a little bit past the descending node once again, so it's not the most ideal of times, but it'll be fine. We're just heading on over towards that normal. And we're going to burn off this stage, like so. And off we go. Okay. So there we go. And we need 1.4 degrees. We'll go ahead and physics warp that as we burn. We're rocking around quite a lot here. I would really prefer that we weren't. But we're coming down to 0.3, 0.2, 0.1. That's as good as we're going to get, it looks like. Okay, that's fine. So we're going to hop back to the tracking station. Just got to get these inclination changes made. So that was, of course, deployable. So next up is Charlie. Wonderful. So let's see what we've got going on here. We're going to need to make our way over towards normal for sure, and we will, of course, set this as Eve being our target. We're not quite to the descending node this time. We're a little early here. Fascinating. This one's a little bit behind some of the others, but that's okay. We'll go ahead and burn this regardless. And let's bring that on down. Apparently we don't have an atmospheric pressure scan or a gravity scan from in space high over the sun. And, I mean, we don't have any connection, so it isn't going to help us here. But that's interesting to note, for sure. So we will physics warp as we work on this burn a little bit. We're probably, because we were a little early there, we're probably not going to be able to get to 0.0. Yeah, 0.2 is the closest we get here, and that's okay for now. We can adjust that later if we decide we want to, but let's head on back to the tracking station. And we need to work on our Ascent module next. So we will grab our Ascent module, which is on an escape trajectory out of Kerbal, and we're going to need to warp forward until that is at a proper time. So that'll be fine. Oh, hello, we're back in 4K. Fantastic. Just pop that back. There we go. And let's take a look at how long it'll be. About 6 days. That's fine. So we're going to go ahead and warp to here. In fact, technically, we should warp to... like here. Okay. So we'll do that. Wonderful. And of course, we need to set Eve as our target. There we go. We're already a little bit past our descending node, so we need to flip around to the normal. And that's exactly what we'll do. How's our inclination looking? About 2 degrees off. That's expected. And let's just go ahead and burn this just very, very gently. Oh, look at that. There's so much gimbaling happening. You know what? We're going to shut these engines down. We're going to just run the 3 engines for now, and we'll reactivate these later if we need them. So let's go ahead and do that. We definitely don't need this level of gimbal currently. We need all these engines for their thrust to weight later on, but that should be reasonably fine. Okay, so what's our thrust to weight? 1.71 should be fine. Excellent. So let's go ahead and physics warp this burn. Down to 1 degree. Half a degree. 0.1 degrees. That's the closest we're getting. Okay, sounds good. So we burned a little bit of fuel there. All of that should have been from these external side tanks. And yes, indeed they were. So that is fantastic. So we know that somewhere around here is when we're going to need to burn. But for this particular one is a little bit earlier. Actually, I feel like that might be the earliest. So let's see what that ends up looking like for an encounter. Okay. Not the greatest encounter I've ever seen, but we can definitely bring that on in. Something along the lines of this. I do want to change our inclination there if we can help it. Something a little bit more along the lines of that. A little more, I feel like. Yeah, about there. We can alter that inclination a little bit more later on. I feel like I overshot it slightly. That's pretty close. That's pretty close right there. And then we definitely want this Periapsis to be a little bit closer in. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that will need to be. I want it to be like, ideally like 100 kilometers, but that might be unviable. We'll see. Actually, it's viable. We'll go for like maybe 120 kilometers. Yeah, that'll do. Okay. So we'll do something along the lines of that. You can see here our inclination is definitely still a little bit off. We can see about adjusting that if I can actually grab the maneuver node here. There we go. Okay, so let's just take a quick look here. Bring that inclination to be more along the lines of that. That should do nicely. Okay. So that's set up. That's going to be in 322 days. So let's head back to the tracking station here. And we want to grab our other vehicle that we can do a maneuver node on. So we're back in 4K. That's super, super helpful. Okay, so let's go ahead and grab our... Where are you? I'm looking right at it. I know I am, but I don't see it for some reason. The Gilly Eve Fuel Transit. I was indeed looking right at it. Perfect. So we know where its maneuver node essentially needs to be. How much fuel is on this right now? Let's find out. A pretty good amount of fuel, but we're certainly not maxed out. Okay. And we've got the docking port junior there, so that's completely fine. Yeah, looks good to me. 345 days means that this encounter will be after the other one. So that's fine. Let's take a look at what this encounter actually entails for us. Honestly, I feel like this encounter is reasonably fine. I think this is okay. So the real question becomes, how exactly are we going to get our 3 rovers that we can't deploy the fairing on to get an encounter with Eve? How indeed. So, first off, we need our mining module here. This is intended to land at Eve. So let's fly this and see what we can experiment with here. So we have lots of fuel, no issues there. We are lacking an external communications device, which is definitely a problem. This one is blocked by the arrow shielding, which I didn't realize happened. So that is definitely good to know. I mean, it makes sense. I should have realized that that happens. But I guess what we know is we know that it's like essentially between the apoapsis and the descending node is when we need to burn this. Now we can't add a maneuver because we're control locked. So we're just going to have to do this the old-fashioned way, I guess. And just feel it out. Which is going to be fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Well, this is going to be 345 days, so it's going to be like here-ish. And there are all 3 of these. So basically what we need to do at this point, our Ascent module is, I think, ahead of all of these. So I think what we actually need to do is head back to the tracking station and do the Ascent module. And all of the burns should be at roughly the same point. They won't be at exactly the same point, but we may be able to fix it with radial burns. So I guess that's what we need to do. We need to go to the Ascent module here. And we just need to warp to our maneuver. Now, unfortunately, Jeb doesn't have the skill to be able to lock to maneuver nodes. I really, really wish he did. But alas, he does not. So we will make our way on over. Are these disabled? Nope, they are not. This is just a very, very heavy craft. Fair enough. Okay, so we will position about here. And let's go ahead and warp towards this. This is, I believe, going to be the earliest burn that we have. And if it isn't, well, it is now, because we can, I guess, just do a radial burn and try to get the others into an encounter. But this is definitely earlier than the other burn, so that's fine. So around we go. And we can see here that these guys are definitely a little bit ahead of us, but we're taking the inside track here with this particular trajectory. So we're catching up on them. Indeed. The fuel transit is the one that we know how long it's going to be. These others, not so much. The Charlie module is lagging quite a lot behind. So that's very interesting. Okay, so our burn is going to be here in just a moment. Fantastic. This is nearly a retrograde burn, but it's not entirely. It's allegedly going to be an 18-second burn, so we want to burn this at T-minus 9 seconds. We'll go ahead and warp towards that. Okay, and we will burn this in just a moment. And off we go to Eve. It's hard to see where the exact maneuver node is here. But we'll just let this go for a little bit. Is it just me, or is this not going down at 1 second per second? This is not going down at 1 second per second. So this is clearly inaccurate. And I don't know why this craft is so broken. It truly is very, very broken. Luckily, this timing issue shouldn't be a big deal. This should be approximately correct and should be in the close enough category. So that's fine. We'll just go ahead and burn this down a little bit, and we're burning a fair amount of fuel out of our side tanks. That is, of course, exactly what we want to do. Gonna physics warp this burn a bit. We do pick up a bit of a shimmy in physics warp, but it does go a fair amount faster. Okay, we're gonna pull out a physics warp here, and we are just going to adjust our angling a little bit. Wonderful. We are, of course, going that away. Fantastic. Okay. This should be good enough. Let's see what that looks like. What do we got here? I want to burn it a little bit more retrograde. And our inclination isn't exactly right either. But we can fix that later. So let's just bring this in. Good enough. And yeah, we can fix our inclination later. We'll have plenty of fuel. It should be fine. Okay, so with that underway, we should probably, at this time, if we can come up here, we should probably switch to this guy. No, that switch target. Unset that target. Thank you very much. We'll switch to it. Perfect. Now the question is, if we burn retrograde here, do we get an encounter? We don't know. We can't actually see the we can't see the maneuver system because of our lack of communications. So we'll just have to do this completely manually and just see what we get. So, let's go ahead and burn it. We're going to physics warp this burn. You can see our Periapsis coming on down there. And let's see how close we end up getting. I sure hope we get patched conics. I think we'll get patched conics. Well, what do we got? That's an encounter. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. Nice. Inclination's a little wacky. That's okay. We'll fix that later. Okay, so there's one. 2 to go. 1 down, 2 to go. So now we will switch over to our deployable module. I don't really care about what encounter we're getting here, because this thing should be more than capable of dealing with it. So let's just go ahead and turn to retrograde. This should be ballpark about when we need to burn. And let's bring it on down. We'll physics warp this as we are burning the majority of this. And now we know that we do get patched conics, so we should be able to tweak this as necessary. So that is absolutely great. Periapsis is approaching the orbit of Eve. Kill the physics warp. That's real close. And getting closer, I think. Yes, that's an encounter. And this encounter is, I would consider, good enough. That's plenty of time there, in theory. Wonderful. Okay, so finally, we need the Charlie module. So the Charlie module is, I feel like we should actually do the, or not the Ascent module, I feel like we should actually do the fuel transit module next. Because the Charlie module is quite a ways away from our target point, it's lagging behind, and that's probably an issue. So let's do the fuel transit module instead. That'll be in 23 days. We'll go ahead and warp to that as soon as we finish this turn. Okay, let's go ahead and warp. So yeah, this is actually going much better than I expected. I do think that the Charlie module is going to be interesting, but I'm hoping that it's not lagging behind by too much, and that we can fix what we need with Radial Burns. Fingers crossed on that. We should have enough fuel in all of these to make this happen, though. And if we don't, just get into orbit and we can refuel. Assuming these all have docking ports, which some of them don't. But that's fine. We can put a docking port on there, no problem. Okay, so this is going to be a 16-minute burn. So, T-minus 8 minutes and 26 seconds is when we want to burn this. We definitely want to physics warp that burn. There is no doubt about it, but that's still going to be a pretty lengthy one. So we want to burn this in just a moment here. In fact, like a little over 10 seconds. I can warp a little further. Okay, and we want to burn this now. We'll physics warp that, and that's going to be one heck of a burn. Like I said, like a 4-minute burn. That said, we have a lot of burn time in this. Like a truly ludicrous amount of burn time. So we'll let that burn away, and in the meantime, the question becomes, is the Charlie module now in a position to begin its burn? I'm hoping that it is. I'm absolutely hoping that it's in a position to begin that burn. It'll be really, really, really awkward if it isn't. So fingers crossed on that one. I mean, worst case scenario, right? Worst case scenario is that we have to do a radial burn. How much extra fuel do we have in the Charlie module? That becomes the question. And since we've, you know, still got a good chunk of burn time on this, it's hard to say. This is not exactly high thrust to weight, but it doesn't need to be. Our amounts of fuel here are relatively low, but we do want to get this thing landed on Gilly and docked up to our mining craft ASAP, just so that we can start filling this. It's going to take a while to fill this up, and we're definitely going to need a lot of fuel to make this all happen. Because, of course, this guy's job is going to be to refuel the center core of the Ascent module, right? So the center core is going to be what brings our Kerbonauts back to Kerbin. So this is going to have to fill up basically that whole core. And that's got a Jumbo 64, it's got an X-32, and then I think this is going to be approximately the right amount of fuel. I think. Fingers crossed on that one. Because of course the Ascent module is going to be refueling on the surface of Eve as well. So we have quite a lot ahead of us on this mission. This is a very, very complex mission. The good news is we're about halfway done with this burn. This is a tiny little engine on here, and it does what we need it to do. We don't need this to be a time-efficient engine, but a fuel-efficient engine, and that's exactly what it is. So that is absolutely wonderful. We're going to continue doing this in physics warp. We've got about another 300 meters per second here. And I actually like that the Charlie module is currently behind Kerbin. That's kind of hilarious. That indicates that we ejected it out in an awkward direction. No doubt about that one. But we should, I think, be in a fairly decent location to do a transit here with the Charlie module. And I'm definitely going to do the Charlie module this episode. I think. Yes, I'm definitely going to do it this episode. Definitely. So that's wonderful. We've got about 4 minutes of burn time left in this burn, which of course means about 1 minute since we're on 4x time acceleration. And that is absolutely wonderful. What this is not is a high thrust to weight ratio. Although our thrust to weight ratio has come up a little bit. So that's good. Our burn time is, of course, decreasing by a pretty dramatic amount, but we don't need all that much more fuel. We're nearly to our destination at this juncture. So we've got about 2 minutes left on this burn, and I do want to make sure that we are hitting this mark pretty closely. We absolutely should be. There's a bit of a hitch every time I zoom into the Eve system. I'm not sure what's going on with that. Maybe your game restart will fix that particular problem. Oh, hello! We're going to call that good enough. Excellent. I didn't realize that we were switching directionality there, or the side of the planet that we were coming in on. That's okay. So let's go ahead and, at this point, switch over to the Charlie module. So, the Charlie module, we'll see if we can get that into an encounter with Eve at the same time. This is going to be interesting. So let's flip around to retrograde, and we may have to do a bit of a radial or anti-radial burn. I feel like we should be in a reasonable situation here. Let's see how close we get. So we are, of course, burning retrograde here. And I think this is pretty decent timing. I hope, anyway. So we're going to come out of this physics warp in just a moment here when we see what we need. This is always nerve-wracking to do without maneuvers. Okay. Okay. So we definitely need to do some radial burns here. I want to check to see which one we want to do. Okay, we want to do radial in. Sounds good. So this is going to be a little less fuel efficient. There's no doubt about that. Well, let's just bring this on in until it becomes no longer efficient. And then we can maybe do a little bit of retrograde and see what we can get out of that. Our closest approach is coming down. Let's continue to physics warp this. Down under 3 million kilometers. Okay. Down under 1 million kilometers. 500,000. 200,000. And that's an encounter. Nice. Now, it's a good enough encounter. It's not perfect, but that'll do the trick. Okay, and that's the challenging part done, is getting those encounters done without maneuver nodes. I'm very happy about that. It is, however, time to put a cut in here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and next episode, we will get all of these into orbit. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and I will see you all next time.